My guest today is Dr. Brian Smith, founder and senior managing partner of IA Business Advisors, a management consulting firm that has worked with more than 19,000 CEOs, entrepreneurs, managers, and employees. In today's episode, we talk about his book that he co-authored with his daughter, Mary Griffin, Positive Influence, Be the I in Team, which shares how to become our best selves with everyone we influence. Welcome to Lifeology.
Thanks, James.
I am looking forward to this. I was reading your background and you got to write the book with your daughter. How was that as a co-author?
It was amazing.
Yeah.
The ability to work with your children in such a powerful context has just been a really good journey for both of us.
Yeah, it's interesting because you have the different roles as well as a father-daughter, and then you have the collegial aspect too. So obviously you guys navigated it really well. But I'm sure there were times, there's a couple times she's like, "Oh, Dad," and you're like, "Oh," But I'm glad you're able to do that as well. Now, did you always know that this was the industry or the kind of the focus that you wanted to have in your company or in you as a professional?
No, it's been an evolution of our body of work in people, process, and technology.
Mm-hmm.
Advisory services that we've done for 27 years. And it's just been a byproduct of understanding of humans through those projects and through those interactions that actually brought this together for us.
When did you first realize about the concept of everyone influences everybody? Because we know about it in theory, but was there a specific event that happened? You're like, oh, wow, I really need to focus on this.
It started back in the late 90s when we were seeing all of the disruption that was coming from the implementation of technology into our lives and how our influence was being siloed and individualized and supported by technology linking us. And I think that's when I started writing in my journals about those experiences of disruption that were being caused.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, the influence component, everyone who's listening now or watching this right now, there's different levels. Some people are really in the C-suite when it comes to their business. Some people may not be in the corporate world. How do you really define influence? So it kind of translates to everyone watching and listening today.
Yeah, so our definition of influence is that every human matters, regardless of what you do or where you at. You have influence, and that influence actually began before we were born. The moment our parents found out that we were going to be born, we began influencing as a human. We changed lives by the announcement or the understanding that we were going to be born, and that never changes. We are constantly influencing as humans, which makes it we feel our biggest responsibility as humans. Whatever your area of influence is, that's a huge responsibility that you have, and we try to get people to understand that influence and make it as positive as they can.
Now, some people are aware of their influence. For example, right now, I'm quote influencing people as they're listening to me, or listening to us right now. But there, oftentimes we don't realize it. Like I can be maybe in the grocery store and I may be influencing something. I don't know. But is there a difference between a conscious influence and an unconscious influence?
Sure, I think it's similar to subconscious and unconscious biases. Sometimes
Okay.
we don't know why we do things or why we feel the way we do, and they come from the different experiences that we have. It's kind of like the ripples in a lake when you throw a pebble. Sometimes you don't know where those ripples end up. You don't know if you smile with somebody passing in a grocery store, you could change their life. They could have been in a very dark place, and that smile is enough to pivot them into a positive place that gets them headed in the right direction. Sometimes we never know where our influence is going to end up. That's why it's so important to be responsible for it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I have heard many stories about people who are in a dark place and have seen someone smile or just walk up and say, "Hey, have a great day." Just really acknowledge them, and it has such a powerful influence on them as well.
Yes.
I want to transition into your book, Be the I in Team. I believe that's actually part of a series.
It is. The I in Team series is our book series. And our first book was Individual Influence, Find the I in Team. And it laid the foundation of understanding who you are and what influenced you to be that person in that moment, which changes with every moment. And what to do with that understanding is what positive influence, Be the I in Team, is
Oh, I
about.
see. Okay.
And our third book, which we're writing now, actually, I'm headed to Colorado this weekend to finish the third book, which will be Responsible Influence, build the I in team. It's how to build that responsibility around you in
Hmm.
whatever area of influence you have.
Wow, that's fantastic. Now, this book though, is it more of a workbook? Is what a business book? I mean, what kind of genre would you place it in?
Yeah, I don't really prefer the word self-help or
Yeah,
self-improvement,
I
but
get it.
that's
Yeah,
actually where it falls. It can be
sure.
used to help build teams. It can be
Mhm.
used by individuals. And for us, individuals means two things. Us alone, when we act alone, we are individual. However, when we're together, like you and I are right here, we are individual together,
Mhm.
influencing a larger body of people.
Hmm.
So, regardless of if you're by yourself or if you're with your team, one to many,
Yeah,
um, we talk about how to capture that influence, manage that influence, and make it positive in whatever area of influence you find yourself. And the book guides you through how to do
oh,
that
good.
with the challenges that come.
Oh, perfect. Okay. I was thinking about this as well when I was reading. You have some questions here that I'll probably be reading as well. So if my viewers and listeners see, or my viewers see me, I'm reading some questions that he has me ask. But I was thinking more about this. There's a whole aspect of we become the embodiment of all the people who have influenced us, all the situations that have influenced us. Do you walk us through how to separate between one influence to make sure that we're now in a healthier place of how we influence other people as well?
Yeah, well, the way that we talked about this in our first book was creating timelines of areas of influence that we know made us pivot and
Mm,
walking ourselves through that timeline to the decision point when we might have pivoted to a new area of influence or a new action of influence or behavior of influence. And while that takes time, it falls right into our chapter about slowing down and understanding yourself,
yeah.
understanding what your makeup is and what you're doing with it, and challenging yourself to be honest with yourself, and accountable to whatever behaviors and actions you've chosen. And if you identify through those timeline developments behaviors or action that are counter to positivity, think about how you can
Mm,
improve that and change that, which again is a new pivot for you.
yeah. And I'm sure we'll get to this in a minute, but how do you specific? So, for example, I have two more shows after you, and I have a few more meetings. We're all busy, but so I know for my next couple of shows, I need to obviously do what I'm doing here, but I also be influencing people as well. Do you have ways in which you have people specifically say check in with themselves to say, for example, James, be mindful of the influence you're about to create right now? Do you have ways in which they're able to really create actionable items, if you will, to be specific with their ability to influence others?
Yeah, I think we should. We like to think in terms of SMART. I don't know if you're familiar with the
Like a
SMART
smart
goal
goal? Uh
setting.
huh. Hmm.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we turn that into smart tactics or smart actions.
Okay.
So, if you're thinking about going into a show, think about what your smart goals might be for that show. Not
Hmm.
just the number of people or
Yeah.
the type of people, but if you can break it down into that, and then think about the questions you ask. What is my end
Hmm.
result? You asked me earlier. What do you want out of this time with me, Brian? And so my answers and the way my cadence and what my mission
Hmm.
is consistent to what that mission is. And if we
Mm.
think that way in our interactions, I prepare for meetings that way. I prepare for my interactions with my clients that way. And
Yeah.
asking questions and listening to learn, and then being thoughtful about responses, slowing down. But yes,
Hmm.
specific, uh, measurable, attainable, realistic, timely comes into my thought process. And we go through an
Yeah.
exercise on how to incorporate that in your life on a regular basis.
Mm. That's perfect. And you said that's part of this book as well?
It is. There's a whole chapter about
Excellent.
smart and how to incorporate smart tactics and smart communication into your life.
Hmm. I like that. That's very intentional. I think it's really important to have that intentionality. Now, are there specific qualities that lend themselves to channeling positive influence? Like a specific things like, oh, let me really be the qualities that I can demonstrate?
Well, I think, belief in self and coming to terms, reconciling um, who you are and what your area of influence is. The hardest part for
Hmm.
some people is accepting the fact that you're important, regardless of who you
Mm.
are and what you're doing. You're
Yeah.
important within your area of influence. You're important to somebody. Start there That's a
Yeah.
very positive, intentional thought, and it feeds more positive, intentional thought. And when you find yourself moving towards negativity, try to get yourself recentered to that positive aspect. You know, how can I make lemonade out of lemons? And lemons come in different shapes, sizes, and in doses. But with that positive mentality and foundation, I think that you are on the path of being a positive influence in whatever area of influence you find yourself.
Yeah, this makes me think of just the concept of lifeology. So, for lifeology was actually a literary term which was created to be the study of life, and so I loved it so much I I trademarked it. And so for me, I really conceptualize this in the way of creating a platform of we all have value, we all have a story to tell, and so we all have lessons to learn and lessons to teach. So for me, I can look at someone and be like, oh my god, I would love to be like that person. What do they do? And let me see how I can emulate that, which would be more specific for how I am. And then, some people can see me and be like, oh, I don't really like what James just did. So I'm going to avoid that. And so it creates a platform where we can all look around and say, we all have value. We all have lessons to learn, lessons to teach. And so just like you're saying here, we all have something to offer. And I think it's really important because sometimes people see us, on camera on things like this, and they think, oh, well, they have it all together. But they don't see on the other side or the steps that it took to get to certain ways. And so to know that we're all the same, we all have pitfalls, we all have joys, we all have pain, but all that is just something important that we're all very similar in that respect.
Yeah, I would agree. And that we continue to have those things that challenge us.
Mm-hmm.
You and I both, even through the evolution of what we do, we are constantly challenged to stay positive and stay in front of the differences. And by the way, the
Yeah.
influences that are new to us each and every day as we talk to guests or talk to clients or talk to people in our lives. It's a reoccurring evolutionary process for us, even though it might appear that we're at the top of that game, if you will. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm still
Certainly.
challenged every day, and I still have to think about what we do intentionally every day.
Mm-hmm. And I like that like I said before, the intentionality of things, because without that, we just continue to repeat the same patterns and behaviors over and over again. And be like, why am I not growing? Why do I keep being in the same spot? How am I here again? And so I think that's what's really important with your message and what you teach is to be intentional. Am I doing what's healthiest for me right now? Just because I can do something doesn't mean I should do something. And so having that awareness of what that looks like allows for a person to respond in a very, thoughtful, proactive way as opposed to a reactive way.
Yeah, that timeline exercise I shared earlier oftentimes creates what we call a clover leaf. So you found
Mm,
your timeline and you end up in the back in the same spot, and then you try something different and you end up in the same spot,
mm,
and you do it again and you end up in the same spot. That exercise helps to identify what's moving me back into the same spot, making the same
interesting.
mistakes every time. And when you do those timelines and actually look at them, you can help self identify decisions, behaviors, influences that brought you back to where you didn't want to be. And it's
Mm.
really a powerful tool that I think helps people in our area of work.
When it goes back to timelines, is that do you focus on one specific event and then seeing how that happened, like maybe event from years ago, and then how what happened with what happened beyond that? And is that what you mean, or is it one specific? Is it more of a theme of work, like education or vocation? How does that work?
You know, it's all of the above. You can break down if you think of, I think in project terms, James, because
Okay.
we manage projects. We
Mm-hmm.
look at things that way. So you can break that down into whatever area of influence is affecting you and look at the decision process that got you to where you are. And sometimes that
Yeah.
is a 10-minute process, and sometimes it can be, for me, in the early evolutions was years of
Mm-hmm.
influence got me to where I was. Years
Mm-hmm.
of influence took me to a pivot point. But as we get and become more professional and more intentional about it, you can apply it to, wow, what happened yesterday and how did I get derailed? Let me
Yeah.
walk
It's good.
back through how that situation started. And you might create, a 1 hour timeline that gets you through the process. And you're like,
Mm.
right there is when I made that decision and decided to go in the wrong direction or the right direction.
I think that'd be really healthy for individuals who have addictive personalities or struggle with some form of addiction too, because we know addiction doesn't necessarily happen in the moment when someone engages on the behavior. I think it starts in their mind and their thinking of what they start to allow something to creep into their mind, and then they allow that to germinate a little bit more in their thoughts, and then pretty soon they have some actions they do, and then they engage in the behavior. So that may be something I really appreciate you saying that. Maybe something I have some people I work with as well, and maybe flesh that out, push that out to my people as well. Obviously, give you credit for it. But I want to transition into this though. There's nowadays there's so many influencers, Instagram influencers, social media influencers. It's and everyone, a lot of the younger people and I guess older people want to be an influencer. What are your thoughts about that? Now, obviously, there's nothing wrong with wanting to be an influencer. What's your thoughts about the concept of influencing, and what's the same, what's different from your methodology?
Yeah, so it's a little frustrating that now your job can be influencer, and you wonder what does that mean. Oftentimes, and you can, as you say, you can create a TikTok video and become an influencer almost immediately and have a voice. Sometimes a voice in things you shouldn't have a voice in. I think that's part of our message, is that your influence is a huge responsibility. Slow down and think about what your influence means and what you're really trying to do with it. If you're trying to entertain people on TikTok and just be an entertainer, own that.
Yeah.
Don't try to venture outside of it and use your ability to influence in ways that are irresponsible, where you really aren't going to understand what the ripple effects are downline later. We have a lot of influencer who, because of their popularity, influence because of that popularity in areas of influence that they probably aren't really qualified for. And then on the flip side to that, those of us that are being influenced by them, slow down and think more thoughtfully about why you're allowing people like that to influence you outside of what their obvious area of influence really is.
Yeah,
and
that's a good point.
Challenge that.
Yeah, that's I think it's great advice. I know for me, when it comes to my show, it's, as you know, it's a very large show, but I don't. I'm very careful because there's my show is very inclusive, and so there are many hot topics I don't bring in. I don't bring in politics. I don't bring in all these different things. Those have their time and place, but that's not the time and place for my show. And so to allow for everyone that's in all different walks of life, from the most influential to the most whatever that may look like. But for me, it creates an environment where people can just be and exist and live in harmony and be able to talk about things like this without allowing the divisiveness or difference of opinions cloud that. So that's one thing I really try and be mindful of, and I hope I do well with that. But I really appreciate you saying that too, because it is an important thing, because I do have influence, you have influence, everyone has influence, and I want to make sure that I can stick within the parameters of the scope of what my show is about.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I'm not saying that these influencers don't have a right to have an opinion about topics.
Oh, of course.
But just be responsible about contextually responsible about how you convey that that opinion, and that sometimes it's just an opinion, it's not a fact.
It's true.
And as the receiver of that influence, understanding that also is our responsibility. We have that same responsibility as the receiver of that information. So I think people should slow down and just put things in context sometimes.
Yeah. For those of you just joining us, I'm speaking with Dr. Brian Smith, and we're talking about his book, Positive Influence, Be the I in Team. Going back to the whole aspect of more of the corporate world, or just more of a team cohesiveness, how do you allow you as an influencer in your team to create a cohesive environment where everyone's pretty much on the same page?
Yeah, so we have a very flat hierarchy, James. Within our area of influence, we own 42 companies. And IA is like the umbrella over those. We provide management services, but those companies in and of themselves do different things: construction, professional services. Very flat. We give authority to the people who require it. For example, I was in the warehouse a couple of weeks ago listening to somebody talk about how they're not the boss and you're not my boss. And I had to turn to the warehouse manager and say, when I'm in your area of influence, when I'm out here in the warehouse, you're the boss. Now, I don't like the word boss. I think it has a somewhat bad connotation, but you have an area of responsibility to manage this warehouse, which means it's not my area of work. I defer to you for what's right, what's wrong, where I can stand, what I can do, what the rules are. Your area of responsibility is to make sure I follow those rules. And I defer to you. We treat every position that way. We defer to their authority within their area of influence. I don't just say, well, you're going to listen to me because I own the company or I'm the boss. And we teach that in our work through smart communication, smart management, and understanding what smart means in the context of influence.
Yeah. Well, only that, but I think it teaches that other people have just as much value as you do. Because as we know, a company or organization is only as strong as the people who feel that they're engaged or a part of it. And so you're really instilling that their value is just as important and that they have just as much say, you know, in the grand scheme of things, to make sure that all areas of their life, specifically either in their niche, whatever they do, that they have a voice to be able to say, yes, this is how I can be most effective in this, by you allowing them to be able to create their voice or find their voice.
Yeah, and we have to back that up with action so that when they make decisions, right or wrong, we use those decisions as opportunities to teach and learn from in a very positive way. We don't take that authority away because a mistake was made. We use that mistake as an opportunity to move us forward, not to discipline or to make it a negative. So we give that authority and we let them keep that authority.
How do you hold people accountable to situations like that?
We make them right their wrongs. We make them accept responsibility. And if they don't, and they continue to try to deflect, we take them, actually, it looks a lot like that clover leaf. We take them right back to the start of the problem and say, try again. You know, justification isn't the way we're going to go. You're going to own this to the point where you don't own it anymore. And we'll walk through that exercise until they actually get it. And that repetitive, consistent behavior settles well in our organization. And I'll say that we have a very good employee organization. Of the 1,000, we have 1,000 employees across those companies. We have very, very low turnover. So I'm really proud of our team and how they perform together.
Yeah. And the fact that you're able to do that with, it sounds like with compassion, because I'm sure a lot of people are like, I don't want to have to do this, you know, but the fact that you're able to do it when you have a really low turnover rate, meaning, you know, a lot of people stay in your company, that means that your compassion level of how you interact with them, it sounds like it's very consistent and very loving and gentle.
Yeah. You know, James, I think that's probably the biggest thing. We care about everybody in our organization. It's like a big family, and we try to treat everybody just like that. Yeah. We still have rules and everything else, but at the end of the day, we care very much for our team.
I can tell that. Well, unfortunately, our time is up. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. We literally flew through this. I told you in the pre-call we'd fly through this. So, Dr. Brian Smith, if my viewers and listeners want to find out more information about you and to purchase your book, Positive Influence, Be the I in Team, where will they find all this information online?
They could visit us at iabusinessadvisors.com. There's a publications page, or go to Amazon and do Positive Influence, Be the I in Team, and you'll find our book there.
Awesome. My viewers and listeners also know that if you can't find this information any other place, simply go to the show notes at jamesmillerlifeology.com, and I'll connect you with Dr. Brian Smith and his book, Positive Influence, Be the I in Team. Thank you so much for being a fantastic guest on my show today.
Thank you, James.